Resident Evil Code Veronica has just received some disappointing news. According to reliable Resident Evil insider Dusk Golem, both the Code Veronica remake and the Resident Evil Requiem DLC have been delayed. Now, before everyone starts panicking, this isn't the first time we've heard about delays at Capcom. The company has a history of delaying projects to ensure they're released in the best possible state. So this isn't necessarily a bad sign for the quality of the games. Dusk Golem also shared some interesting information about the development of the Resident Evil 0 remake, which is expected to be Capcom's next remake after Code Veronica. We now have a much clearer picture of Capcom's roadmap and when these games could actually arrive. So there's a lot to discuss. Let's get straight into it. Recently, someone on X asked Dusk Golem about the development of the Code Veronica remake. They questioned why the game would need extra time if development was reportedly ahead of schedule. After all, if the game was progressing so well, shouldn't it already be close to completion? It's actually a fair question. In one of my previous videos, I talked about how smoothly Code Veronica's development was reportedly going. I also mentioned that Capcom's release window would ultimately depend on how development progressed. If everything stayed on track, the game could launch earlier than expected. However, game development is never that simple, especially for a remake as ambitious as Code Veronica. According to Dusk Golem, the Code Veronica remake entered development in late 2022. At that time, Capcom's internal target was to release the game during the first quarter of 2028. Their original roadmap reportedly looked something like this: Resident Evil Requiem in 2025, Resident Evil Requiem DLC in 2026, Resident Evil 0 remake in 2027, Resident Evil Code Veronica remake in 2028. That was Capcom's initial plan. Originally, the studio intended to release the 0 remake before Code Veronica because Zero's development was progressing exactly as planned. However, things eventually changed. According to Dusk Golem, Code Veronica actually progressed much faster than expected. It moved ahead of 0 remake in Capcom's internal schedule, meaning it was now planned to release before 0. That sounds like fantastic news, doesn't it? Well, not entirely. Although Code Veronica is reportedly far ahead of its original 2028 target, the game is still deep in active development. Dusk Golem says the team is currently going through an intense crunch period while Capcom decides exactly where the game fits into its release schedule. In other words, the game is progressing extremely well, but Capcom still hasn't locked in a final release window. This lines up with what I said in my previous video. If development continues to go smoothly, I still believe there's a good chance Code Veronica could launch during the first half of 2027. However, if Capcom decides the game needs additional polish, more content, or larger gameplay improvements, then it could easily move into late 2027 or even slip back towards its original 2028 target. And honestly, if you've played the original Code Veronica, you'll know why. This isn't a small Resident Evil game. It's one of the biggest entries in the franchise, featuring multiple locations, a lengthy campaign, numerous enemy types, and several major story moments. Reimagining all of that with modern visuals and gameplay is a massive undertaking. So, if Capcom needs more time to perfect it, I'd much rather wait than receive a rushed remake. Now let's talk about why this could be disappointing for Resident Evil fans. According to previous reports, Capcom plans to release the Resident Evil Requiem DLC after the Code Veronica remake. Following that, the studio is expected to launch the Resident Evil 0 remake. That means if Code Veronica slips into 2028, the entire schedule shifts forward. The Requiem DLC would likely move into 2028 as well, while the 0 remake could end up releasing in 2029 or even 2030. So, one delay could have a domino effect across Capcom's entire Resident Evil roadmap. That's why this latest update is so important. Now, during the same Q&A session, Dusk Golem shared several additional details that are definitely worth talking about. One of the biggest confirmations is that Claire Redfield remains the true main character of Code Veronica. The producers reportedly confirmed that this remake is primarily Claire's story, with the narrative focusing heavily on her journey throughout the game. Another interesting detail is that Capcom isn't planning to remove any major story scenes. Instead, they're following the same approach used in previous Resident Evil remakes. That means players should expect scenes to be rearranged, expanded, reimagined, or presented differently to improve pacing and storytelling, rather than simply being cut. Personally, I think that's the right approach. It allows Capcom to modernize the game while still respecting the original story. Another interesting detail concerns the game's title. According to the producers, Capcom now prefers naming future games using the format Resident Evil followed by a subtitle. We've already seen this with Resident Evil Village and Resident Evil Requiem, and it appears the same approach will continue going forward. So if these reports are accurate, the remake could simply be called Resident Evil Veronica, as Capcom believes that title fits the game's modern reimagining better. We also learned that Code Veronica takes place around 3 months after the events of Resident Evil 2, which was already expected, but it's nice to receive further confirmation. As for Chris Redfield, The producers reportedly said he won't be drastically different or significantly stronger than we've seen previously. Although one funny detail I noticed in the reveal trailer is that Chris has dumbbells sitting in his room. So yes, he's clearly been putting in some work. Maybe he hasn't reached his legendary boulder punching physique just yet, but he's definitely getting there. Finally, the heart of Code Veronica remains exactly what fans remember. It's the story of Claire Redfield, Chris Redfield, and of course, Albert Wesker. These characters are the backbone of the game, and thankfully, it doesn't sound like Capcom is changing that. So, where does that leave us? Right now, Code Veronica is still actively being developed. Capcom hasn't officially confirmed a release date, and despite all the rumors, we still don't know whether it'll launch in 2027 or be pushed into 2028. For now, we'll have to wait for more official information. Personally, I'd rather Capcom take the extra time and deliver the best remake possible than rush it out before it's ready. But what do you think? Would you be happy waiting until 2028 if it meant getting the best possible version of Code Veronica? Or are you hoping Capcom surprises everyone with a 2027 release? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest Resident Evil news, leaks, and updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.